What's convenient?
The fact that you stopped recording when you wanted to.
When I walked away, it was convenient.
Yeah.
Dude, what is your problem, bro? Are you looking this? You see this? Are you recording?
We're all recording. I'm recording. I'm not hiding anything.
Good. I'm gonna get that body cam, bro.
Okay.
I'm gonna file a complaint on you.
Okay.
The moment doesn't announce itself. It never does. There's no raised voice, no sudden movement that signals a turning point. What changes instead is the temperature. The air tightens. Words slow down. The exchange becomes careful in the way people get careful when they realize something has already gone wrong. Up to this point, control has been shared. Loosely, unevenly, but shared. The encounter still has exits. It still allows for correction. Then something subtle happens. A choice is made, and from that point forward the situation no longer belongs to everyone in the frame. Authority doesn't arrive loudly. It arrives casually. It shows up as confidence that doesn't need permission, as decisions made without explanation, as certainty that doesn't pause to check whether it's deserved. This is how most escalations begin, not with force, but with assumption. The body language shifts first. Shoulders square, feet stop moving. One side settles into place, while the other remains in motion, still trying to understand what's being asked of them. That imbalance matters. Motion signals uncertainty. Stillness signals control. Nothing illegal has been declared yet. Nothing dramatic has happened. But the range of options is already narrowing. When someone is told they're free to go, but the interaction doesn't actually end, the words stop meaning what they should. Freedom becomes conditional, temporary, revocable. And the person on the receiving end senses that immediately, even if they can't articulate it. The camera keeps running. That matters too. Cameras change behavior, but not always in the way people expect. Sometimes they don't restrain power. Sometimes they harden it. Sometimes they make people commit more fully to a version of events they've already decided on. This is where reputation quietly enters the scene. Not spoken, not acknowledged, but present. The kind of reputation that exists before facts are checked, before footage is reviewed, before anyone outside this moment knows what happened. A reputation that can be damaged without being officially accused of anything. You can see the calculation happening in real time. Not malicious, not frantic, just procedural. If this continues, what will it look like later? Who will be believed? Who will be remembered as cooperative? And who will be remembered as difficult? That question shapes the rest of the encounter. There's an offer made, framed as voluntary, framed as helpful, but offers from authority rarely feel optional. Declining them can be read as resistance. Accepting them can be read as admission. Either way, the trap is already set. The person without power tries to keep things grounded, concrete, evidence-based, calm. That's not weakness, it's instinct. When someone feels the ground shifting under them, they look for something solid to stand on. But solidity doesn't always matter when the narrative is already forming. The tone changes again. Slightly sharper now, less collaborative. The conversation stops being about what happened and starts being about how it's perceived, about who controls the record. This is where escalation becomes inevitable. Not because anyone is yelling, but because one side is no longer listening. Listening implies the possibility of change, and that possibility is closing. Silence starts doing more work than speech. Pauses stretch longer. Responses shorten. The space between words fills with implication. Every second adds weight. What's important here isn't a single sentence or action. It's the accumulation. Small decisions stacking on top of each other, each one defensible on its own. Together, irreversible. When authority stops needing cooperation, it stops negotiating. From here on, the interaction only moves in one direction. and everyone in the frame seems to know it. After the turning point, time behaves differently. Minutes stretch. Consequences arrive before explanations. The encounter continues, but it's no longer open-ended. It's procedural now. The outcome may not be announced, but it's already being prepared. This is where systems take over. Not policies on paper, but habits, routines, the muscle memory of enforcement. Once those activate, personal discretion shrinks. Not because it can't be used, but because using it would require admitting the previous step was wrong. That admission rarely happens in motion. The language becomes careful again, but not in the same way as before. Now it's defensive. Statements are phrased to protect future versions of events, to survive replay, to withstand review. The present moment is no longer the priority. The record is. You can hear it in the pacing. Short answers, controlled reactions, no unnecessary detail. This isn't about clarity, it's about containment. The person being acted upon feels it immediately. The shift from participant to subject is unmistakable. The conversation is still happening, but it's no longer mutual. One side speaks to be heard, the other speaks to be documented. That difference matters. This is how normal life collides with institutional power. Not through violence, but through momentum. Once things are moving, stopping them requires more force than starting them did. There's a moment where cooperation is reframed. What was previously compliance becomes expectation. What was voluntary becomes implied. The terms change without being renegotiated. And when someone pushes back, not aggressively, not emotionally, just insistently, it's interpreted as friction. Friction inside a system designed for smooth operation is treated as a problem to be resolved. Resolution in this context doesn't mean understanding, it means conclusion. You can see the narrowing tunnel, fewer questions, fewer explanations. The interaction compresses. Everything unnecessary is stripped away until only authority remains. This is where the damage begins, even if nothing dramatic happens on screen. Damage doesn't require force. It requires record. Once something is written down, once a version of events is fixed, reversing it becomes costly. Jobs don't wait for appeals. Reputations don't pause for clarification. Social consequences don't respect due process. And the person at the center of it all understands that too late. Not because they weren't paying attention, but because they assumed fairness was built into the system by default. It isn't. Fairness has to be actively maintained, and here it slips quietly out of reach. The irony is that calm behavior doesn't always protect you. Sometimes it makes you easier to process, easier to categorize, easier to move along the conveyor belt. This is where the situation stops being about conduct and starts being about control. Who decides when it ends? Who decides what it meant? Who decides what happens next? The power imbalance is now complete. From the outside, it may look routine, unremarkable. Another minor encounter, another administrative decision, but inside it, a life is already shifting course. The system doesn't feel the weight of that. It doesn't have to. It moves on. The person it moves through does not. The consequences arrive later, quietly, away from the camera. That's where most of the damage lives. By the time the encounter is over, the narrative is already in motion. Phone calls are made, reports are filed, decisions ripple outward into places the original moment never touched. Employment, reputation, stability. None of those appear on the Bodycam. But they're set in motion by it. This is the part that's hardest to undo, not the physical act, but the story that replaces it. Once an official version exists, it gains weight simply by existing. Challenging it requires resources, time, endurance. things most people don't have to spare. What began as a brief interaction becomes a defining event. Not because it was violent, not because it was chaotic, but because it carried authority. Authority doesn't need to prove itself in the moment. It only needs to persist long enough to be believed later. As the process unfolds, contradictions surface. Details don't align, timelines stretch. What was once presented as certain begins to look less solid under scrutiny. But by then, the initial harm is done. The system is slow to correct itself, faster to act than to admit error. This delay has a cost: emotional, financial, psychological. Living under an unresolved accusation, even an informal one, changes how people move through the world, how they're seen, how they see themselves. The person at the center of this doesn't get to rewind. They don't get to step back into the moment and choose differently. The choice that mattered has already been made for them. What remains is recovery, and recovery isn't guaranteed. When accountability finally enters the picture, it does so cautiously, through reviews, through statements, through measured language designed to minimize disruption. Institutions protect themselves reflexively. That's not corruption, it's design. But design has consequences. Each time authority is misapplied without immediate correction, trust erodes. Not dramatically, incrementally. People remember how it felt more than how it was explained. In the end, the camera becomes evidence, not of what happened in the room, but of how power behaved when it wasn't being challenged loudly, when it didn't have to justify itself, when it assumed compliance instead of consent. That's the lesson this footage leaves behind. Not a slogan, not a verdict, just a record of how easily momentum can replace judgment. The moment control shifted, it never shifted back, and everything that followed flowed from that single, quiet decision.